You called me out. You saw what I was doing there. I was trying to give scientific reasons for my affectation
Oh,
for green chili cheeseburgers.
sorry, I ruined it.
Yeah, dang. Wish you wouldn't do that.
Welcome to the Greens Blues 14er podcast. This episode, Zach dreams of king-size candy bars. I confess my caffeine addiction, and we sit down and talk about a critically important part of the hike, nutrition. So, Zach, we're going to talk about nutrition today, but before we get into that, what's going on with you right now?
Well, Eric, we're recording this in the spring. And before we started recording this, I was telling you that spring is usually the time of year where sometime around March, I would start emailing you, "Hey, Eric, what you doing in 4 months?" And there's a reason for that. Usually when things start to warm up and I start getting outside a little bit more, my mind starts literally dreaming of hiking. I start having dreams about hiking again. I start planning. My eyes are bigger than my stomach. Uh, I
That's pretty natural, I think.
Yeah, I drew up a list last night and it had 20 peaks on it for the summer. I don't think
No,
I'm going to get that many.
there you go.
Maybe usually for me it's in the 10 to 15 range for summer. My daughter is getting older, so maybe I can take an extra day or two, but yeah, I'm making wish lists, planning trips. I've got a stack of maps sitting next to, on the bedside table here. So I'm only 4 months. I don't know if I can sustain this for 4 months or for 3 months, but here we go.
Your heart
So
is already moving westward.
yeah, yeah, it's not, I still have work to do here. Like I'm still in the middle of a semester. I should probably be present and like engaged. I know it's going to happen one day. I'm going to be in the middle of a discussion with a student, having some high-minded discussion about ethics or philosophy or religion or something. And they're going to be saying something really profound. And I'm going to look at them and be like, "I'm sorry, what? Come again? What?
Pacific Peak? What? Oh
Huh?
no, no, no. Wow.
Were you talking about a traverse?
You
What was that? 4 peaks in one day? That's intriguing.
oh,
Say
I
more."
like I like the morals involved with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's rather efficient. Yeah, so that's kind of where my head's at right now. And this is usually the time of year where I start trying to train a little bit more with hiking in mind. Kind of tend to be seasonal. Summers when I hike, I'm hiking and I'm maintaining on a couple other things. Fall is where I tend to try to do some big long bike rides. And the winter is when I ride a bike a lot for fitness. I ride my bike indoors and I try to lift some weights and get some strength back up. Spring is when I start kind of re-engaging, I guess what we would call cardio more.
Mm-hmm.
And and I may even run a little bit. I don't know if I told you this, but my daughter is in Girls on the Run,
Oh
which is
wow.
a program for young girls to run, which is
Yeah,
fantastic.
that's
My
cool.
daughter's a great runner. I come home one day and my lovely wife says to me, "Hey, Zach, guess what?" I say, "What?" And she says, "I've signed you up for a 5K." And I was like,
Oh, there it
"Oh."
is.
And so I've been running for that. And what I realized is that like my heart wise, I'm fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my joints are like, "Hey there, brother. You haven't done
What
this
are
in
you
a
doing?
while. What are you doing? Huh? What's this isn't like being on a bike anymore." So so that's what's going on in my world right now,
No,
hiking
that's cool.
related.
That sounds like fun. I think dreaming about the summer hikes is always fun. I've got my little list of 13ers that I'm starting to kind of build
Ooh.
up and that I want to start considering. The more that I read about like people's trip reports and different books, and the more I've talked with you about the 13ers you've done, the 3,060 that you've done in your life that the
It's
more
more like
intrigued I'm getting too.
110, but yeah.
Close. But
So, do you have one that you're thinking of, Eric?
I have a,
You
being
got
an
a
engineer,
list?
I have a spreadsheet. Yeah. I've got,
Yes, I
like,
keep a spreadsheet too.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I've got probably 15 or 20 of them that are on my list and kind of what class rating they are and what sub range they're in. And so I've got a handful of them that I'm considering. In a future episode, we should talk about some of the ones that I'm interested in that you've already done that you can give me some guidance on. I think that would be a fun discussion.
I'd love that. And yeah, maybe one day, maybe future episode, we could just share our wish lists for the summer. That might be kind
Oh,
of
that's a good
fun.
call. I like
Yeah,
that. I like it.
yeah. Well, so what are we talking about today, Eric?
So today we're going to focus on a really important topic when it comes to hiking on the mountain, and that is nutrition. So being an engineer, I have little sayings that come and go sometimes, and one of them is garbage in, garbage out. And I think that's appropriate for this discussion and just knowing what to eat and what not to eat, and how what we put into our bodies can help or hurt us on the mountain. It's an important discussion, so we're going to get into that today.
And just to clarify, what we're talking about is two things. What we're talking about is nutrition the day of, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe immediately preceding. So maybe the evening
Like the night
before
before.
a big hike, the day of, and maybe what you eat immediately afterwards. The advice we're going to give here is not advice. We should say this. Here's our disclaimer. I am not a medical professional, although I am a doctor.
You are a doctor of philosophy.
Yeah, but not that kind of doctor, right? PhD in religious studies. And Eric is, we both have degrees in the sciences, but we're not those kinds of people. So a lot of this is just going to be just general principles, but also some things that we've learned as we've gone through our journey. We're both in
Hmm.
our 40s, and we've had enough time to kind of try out and fail on in some interesting ways with respect to food and nutrition. So we're gonna hopefully relay at least some of our wisdom.
Yep. So why don't we start off with some things that maybe some really just straightforward tenets about nutrition and just some things that kind of can summarize what we're going to go through nutrition wise.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing that I've had to learn, but I mean I knew it theoretically when I was probably a biology major in college, but I've had to learn the hard way is that it is hard for your body to digest fats and proteins at altitude.
Mm.
Probably because you're operating in a close to anaerobic
Well, yeah.
environment. You know, when you're at altitude, you just don't have as much oxygen. And if you're pushing it physically, you really don't have as much oxygen. So you're not able to break down fats and proteins as efficiently as you are carbohydrates, simply because those require more oxidation in order to be metabolized. So that I think brings me to probably the most important part, which is glycogen stores are really important. So what you've got in your body as your sugar reserves and what you've got in your stomach as carbohydrate is probably your biggest ally.
Mm.
And if you look at a lot of elite athletes, if you look at cyclists, people that are operating kind of close to anaerobically a lot of the time in that similar kind of regime, they're going to eat a lot of carbs before they put in big efforts. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, one of the biggest things in terms of food. The other thing that you're putting in your body is liquid. So for me, it's not just food that I'm putting into me, it's also the amount of liquid that I'm putting into me. It's really, really dehydrating to be at altitude. So anything above 10,000 feet, you're going to dry out a lot quicker. You're going to lose that as perspiration. You're just going to lose that as exhalation. Your body's also metabolizing a fair amount quicker because you're moving. And so all those waste products have to be excreted. So you're going to probably pee off a lot of your water too.
Yep.
So hydration's big, big, big. And then I would say probably the third most important principle is that all bodies are different. So Eric I've kind of joked about it before. Eric eats like a hummingbird when he's on like
It's true.
like I'm over there scooping down oatmeal right before we hike. Like, and Eric's over there nibbling on like a couple nuts like a
I have a
squirrel.
sunflower seed in my pocket that I just randomly found, and oh, here's breakfast.
Here's breakfast. I'm good. And never once has he been like, I'm dying on the mountain. Like, you've been fine. If I ate what you ate, I would probably just be like crying somewhere on the trail. So we're different and people have different metabolic rates.
Yep.
So a lot of this is just those three general principles are if anyone takes those home, that's what's important is that be mindful of look, you can't put a bunch of fat in your body at 12,000 feet and hope that it's going to give you that boost of energy that fat gives you at a lower altitude. It's just
Mm,
not.
yep.
And you can't eat a lot of protein and hope that your body breaks that down properly. You're depriving your stomach of oxygen because you're moving so quickly and it just can't break stuff down as quickly. So
Mm,
that and the importance of hydration are probably the two most important principles to keep in mind. I would also add that you can train metabolic flexibility. And if people want to Google that stuff, there's a lot of people out there that do intermittent fasting,
yep.
different kinds of regimes that allow their body to do more with less. That may be something worth investigating if, like me early on in hiking, as I'll relay in a minute, I used to kind of deplete my carbohydrate reserves really rapidly.
Hmm.
And I have not done that as much lately because I've found some kind of ways around that. And that's something that people need to keep in mind. If you are prone to that, then you may want to try to fast a little bit and get your body to be a little bit more efficient with what it's got. Do you have any general principles that you would recommend, Mr. Eric?
Just a couple of points. Hydration and just we've touched on it in earlier episodes. I have just learned that when I run out of water on the mountain, which is not often, but when it does happen, I greatly regret it. And so in the years that I've been hiking in the mountains, one thing that I've learned is that I will just take as much water as I can physically have in my pack and that I can carry with me from a weight standpoint. So I just want to prevent running out as much as possible. So for me, that's important. One thing you mentioned in terms of getting near an anaerobic state, I know that during my more formidable running days, which are a bit behind me now, but anaerobic state generally lead to the creation of lactic acid. And from a physical standpoint, I know doing stretches and kind of slightly aggressive walking after the buildup of lactic acid can be good for the muscles, but is there any effect that lactic acid has on us from a nutritional or any other kind of standpoint on the mountain?
There is a way you can, speaking of training, you can train your body to more efficiently use lactic acid as a fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Cyclists are particularly good at this, and
Okay.
long distance runners are particularly good at this. There are training programs where you can Google like lactic shuttling or lactate shuttling, where you can train your body to use lactic acid as a fuel
As an
source,
energy source, yeah.
as an energy source. And I think that's something worth investigating. Hiking is weird because hiking is it's an aerobic activity. Like you want to be breathing most of the time,
Yeah.
and you're never stressing your body so badly that it goes into a fully anaerobic state. But you're kind of always on the edge. It's kind of you're kind of right at zone 3 in a lot of hiking. Now, of course, you want to train so that it's hiking is more like at a zone 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you're kind of operating in that kind of region, you're gonna bump up against it occasionally, especially if you're going up a hill really hard. And that's where, yeah, training to make your body more efficient at using lactic acid might be of benefit. Afterwards, you're going to want to try to flush that from your system
Mm-hmm.
because lactic acid is it's oxidative and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's going to go through your body and create a bunch of free
A
radicals.
lot of inflammation. Yep.
Yeah, and a bunch of inflammation. So again, post hiking, hydration is super important, and hiking hydration is important. There is nothing more stressful or that it freaks me out more than like my running out of water. And it seems like every time I've run out of water, I can't find it
Yeah,
anywhere to purify. Like
of
I'll be
course.
hiking all day and I'll be like, wow, there's water, there's water, there's water. And then the minute I run out of water, I was like, where did all the
Where did
water
it go?
go? So I'm with you. I think it's totally worth carrying a little bit extra weight just to avoid that. And I
Yeah.
guess in terms of things we're trying to avoid, the cramping of not having enough salts and water, I think is something that I've only had that once or twice, but dang if that's not debilitating.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think I've run into a fair bit is what people call bonking, where essentially you've depleted your glycogen reserves and you've got nothing somewhat literally in the tank. And at that point, it's almost too late to put stuff back in your body. Or if you do, you're going to have to sit down
You have to wait.
and wait. You're going to have to
Yeah.
eat a couple bananas or put some stuff in your body so that you're no longer in a kind of hypoglycemic state. That's the one that worries me the most is that I just start running out of juice. It happened to me on a 13er a few years ago on Phoenix Peak in the Lagaritas. I got to like 13,000 feet and I had nothing. Like
Mm.
the gas had run out of the car. No, I kept pushing it and I kept going, but I was like, I could not put enough fuel back into my body at that point. And I only got it back after I had summited and after I was like halfway done with the descent. And all of a
Oh,
sudden I was
wow.
like, oh, I've got energy
Did
again.
that feel like a second win almost when
Yeah.
that happened?
I was like, oh, I'm good now.
Mm.
But that's about the point where my body had digested it and put it back into my muscles,
Yeah.
right? And that was 3 hours after I probably really needed it. So
How often does that kind of thing happen to you on the mountain? Like you mentioned Phoenix Peak, has that happened a fair amount to you, or you're generally very prepared for your hikes, so I don't imagine it's been that often, but
it happened as we'll relay in our little stories here in a minute. That used to happen a lot more often.
hmm.
And maybe that's a segue to kind of how I've eaten in the past. When I was a kid, so here's Zach's different phases of hiking nutrition, right? When I was a kid, my dad, and I'm sure I don't know how many Gen X people listen to this, but when I would hike with my dad or even backpack, especially backpacking with my dad, we carried Quaker instant oatmeal.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And when I was a little kid, I'd eat one packet. When I was like preteen, I'd eat two packets. And then when I was a teenager, I'd eat three
Like a
packets.
whole box. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably what I needed. So when I went to college and started hiking on my own, and then eventually went into, graduate school and kept hiking on my own, I was kind of still wedded to that. I don't know why. But if anyone's ever looked at those oatmeal packets, they're equal parts like sugar,
hmm.
or like fructose, and then some oats. And my body would just blaze through that sugar.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so I think pretty much every hike I ever had as a kid and well into my teens and college age, I bonked out. Like
Mm.
there would just I thought that was normal. Like there was a point where I would be like, wow, here's the part of the hike where I feel like doo
I
doo.
hit the wall.
Yeah, I hit the wall again. There it is. And I didn't realize that that was the result of some bad eating, right? And so my second phase of kind of pre hiking eating, I thought I went just completely the other direction.
Oh
I
wow.
would eat like a ton of food the day before a hike or the morning before a hike,
hmm.
like a big Mondo breakfast burrito, with lots of like bacon and eggs and cheese. Or for a while, my wife and I would live in Copper Mountain in the summers. Every week on a Sunday, like this was my hiking food for the week, I would make like a quiche, and I would make it with like egg yolks and cream, right? It had like eggs, bacon, cheese, broccoli. It was probably the equivalent of eating like 1200, like a slice of it was like 1200 calories. It's like I put heavy cream in it. It was banana pants. And I would eat it and I'd just be like, oh God. Like I could just feel this grenade of like fat and
Fats, yeah.
like not good fats either. It wasn't like just sitting in my gut. And
You're
you
not going
know,
to
if I,
sign up for a bantamweight wrestling tournament after that, are you?
yeah, I'm not cutting weight on that. I
Yeah.
would now what I found though when I did that was that if I had sufficient time to digest it before getting to the trailhead, so I would munch on that at like 5 a.m. in Copper Mountain, and then I would drive to a trailhead. And if I had about an hour, I was good.
It'd probably help out a lot, actually, I would think.
But if I didn't have that time to digest it and I just started out, then I had this big mass of undigestible cakey goodness or pie goodness, this quiche floating around in me.
Uh,
There, some of my bigger hiking efforts when I was in my early 30s were fueled by that kind of food.
mhm.
And I could make big, long efforts with that because I had broken down those fats and whatnot. And so then I moved into a different phase, which is what you've seen for the most part, Eric. Morning of, I eat a big bowl of oatmeal.
Mhm.
I know a lot of cyclists will eat like oatmeal or toast. I'm just putting carbs into my body, and usually what I do is I make some oatmeal and it's got some nut butter in it, put like sun butter in there. I put some dried fruits in there, sometimes some dried nuts, or I blend up some cashews or something like that. I put a little bit of salt in there just to give my body some salts. I don't put any sugars in there. So if I'm going to sweeten it, I sweeten it with like mashed up dates or a little bit of applesauce or oat milk, which is kind of naturally sweet. So those are been kind of the phases that I've moved through. I would like to say that the phase I'm in, I'm a little bit wiser now. I don't bonk out at all anymore.
Mhm.
So usually what that does is I put all those good carbs in me and I don't have to take I can eat those and then start hiking and I'm okay. And my body can slowly break them down. And then usually about 2 hours in, I have to munch on a banana or something like that, or a Lara bar or whatever. And then I'm really good for quite a while after that.
Hmm.
And I can sustain big, long efforts all day long, hike for 15 to 20 miles, doing that and then having a lunch, which we'll talk about in a minute. But those are my different phases of pre hike nutrition. How about you, Eric? What are the eras of Eric and nutrition?
Well, before we get into that, you've somewhat come full circle with the oatmeal thing, right? So you're not doing the highly processed mega sugar oatmeal, but some sugar, more natural sugars
Mm-hmm.
with some of the fruit and other things that you'll add in there, along with the oatmeal itself. But it's a bit more of a maybe a sophisticated way to consume your energy in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the technical way to put it is I'm eating food that has a medium glycemic index.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the carbohydrate that I consume, so I eat rolled oats. Sometimes if I'm feeling fancy, I get the steel cut oats. Those are going to break down a little slower and they're going to release their energy a little slower into my body and they're not going to spike my blood sugar. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what I'm looking like if I'm to make it scientific, that's kind of what I've arrived at over
Mm-hmm.
time. But yeah, I have come full circle. I mean, we're all just going back to be in our childhood again, aren't we,
Yeah.
Eric? We're all like, I'm making apples and cinnamon oatmeal, and that was always
Oh,
my favorite oatmeal as a kid too.
yep.
So
The maple
God,
and brown sugar.
maple and brown, and then you can mix the packets and really get
Oh
crazy out
man,
there.
I never did that. That's
Or the peaches and cream and the maple and brown
oh,
sugar
that's
together.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Dynamite.
There you go.
So how about you, Eric?
Yeah, I would say I don't know if I've ever really had. eras other than just one. So I've I've been living in Colorado for, at the time of this recording, almost 15 years, and been hiking in the mountains that long. And my diet has really never changed. I've always just
It
brought
works.
it has. Yeah, somehow it's always consisted of pretty straightforward trail mixes and protein bars, and that's for me that's pretty much everything. It's breakfast, it's lunch, it's snacking on the trail, and I just try to kind of consume, I guess, somewhat in moderation on the way. Obviously, I don't want to eat too much when I'm halfway up and then start cramping up, further on. But my diet on the mountain is actually really straightforward. And again, like you said, it works. It's not something that I've had to really refine over time. I'm sure there are lots of ways that I can improve it and feel even better on the trail, but it's worked. It's pretty simple, and I've been good with it so far. So it's probably more after the hike that I get a little more wacky, but that's more like, hey, we did it. We're done. Now I can have a giant pizza or something like that and then get home. So my eating habits have been pretty straightforward.
So, in terms of like scientifically, though, that makes sense, right? I've seen your handfuls of stuff that you're consuming. It's essentially what I guess Midwesterners would call gorp, right?
Gorp, yep, exactly.
Good old raisins and
Good old
peanuts.
raisins and peanuts, yep.
And I mean, yours is a more varied trail mix. So you bring some pretty nice trail mixes along. But when you think about that, there's a reason that that stuff's popular, right?
Exactly.
You've
Yep.
got nuts and cashews and almonds and stuff in there. Those are good fats. Those are relatively easily digestible fats. You've got raisins and other things that'll give you some simple sugars and some carbohydrate. So, in terms of the nutritional mix, you're probably right in your own sweet spot there. You're also a runner and you're training your body to do more with less by running.
hmm
Is What do you usually eat before long runs, Eric?
You know, I was trained in high school cross country that before any big run, it was good to carbo load. So I would eat a massive spaghetti dinner before any race. My family has since gone gluten free, so we'll have like alternate grain pastas that we'll have, which probably don't have as much carbs, and I don't know that carbo loading is necessarily ideal for me before a big hike these days. Although having some carbohydrates maybe the night before can be helpful, and just kind
Mm-hmm.
of by the time I wake up, those carbs have digested and can give me a better chance of having some decent energy on the mountain. So yeah, that's probably the one thing that I've tried to do before a big run or a big hike is just have some level of carb digestion the night before so that I'm a little bit better prepared energy wise for a big hike. So,
I'm with you on that. We haven't touched on that yet. The food that we eat beforehand, the night before, I
mhm.
think is really important. I've learned a couple things there. Rule number one for me, don't have alcohol the night before you go
Mm,
hiking. Surprisingly dehydrates you. Uh, wow. And the other thing that I've learned is that, yeah, some kind of moderate carb intake. Not many people subscribe to carbo loading anymore, but you do need to eat some carbohydrate. And you should also have some fats too, right? Build up some of those stores because your body will be able to kind of dig into those as you go along. So a nice meal for me might be a piece of meat with like a sweet potato or something like that.
there you go.
Something that's nutrient dense. It's going to kind of give all your body that it needs as you go along. What have you learned from all this, Eric?
I guess I haven't really learned a lot because I haven't changed anything. And again, the only thing that I really have focused on over the years is just bring more water, make sure I don't run out, and I get into a pretty bad spot if I do run out of water. So I think that's honestly, that's probably the only thing that I've learned. And maybe the fact that I'm really stuck in my ways when it comes to eating because I haven't changed a stinking thing. So yeah, I've been pretty simple from that standpoint. So what about you, Zach? What have you learned over time that you can share with us?
Well, see, you've attained wisdom much earlier than I have.
That's
I've had to like
It's
make
debatable.
mistakes to get there, right? Mine has been what we like to call trauma learning, and yours has been just learning. Um, I think the big thing for me is to first of all be mindful of the glycemic index of the food that I eat on the
Mm,
day of hiking. So while I'm hiking, normally I don't like to eat foods that are have a slightly higher glycemic index. I try to eat more fats and proteins in my regular life and good fats at that.
yep.
But while hiking, I need to eat food that's going to fuel me while I'm hiking. And so I'm focused mainly on those, on kind of medium chain carbohydrates that my body can slowly break down. So hence the oatmeal, but also a little bit of fat, hence the nut butter or whatever. And then the food that I'm consuming as I'm hiking, if I eat a banana, that's I know that's going to give me a little bit of energy, keep me going, or a Lara bar, Cliff bar, stuff like that. I will eat some fruit too. You've seen me.
Yep.
We've talked about my plum cots
Oh yeah.
here. Fruit sugars are quick fuel, but they're not going to last you, right?
Exactly.
So the other thing that I've learned is that when we've summited or gotten to a place where I might not be using as much energy or I can foresee not using as much energy, then I can put some fats back in my body. So as I'm hiking during the morning, in the morning when I eat before I go or before I start, it's carbs. And then when we have lunch, I'll eat a little salami or I'll eat more nuts.
Yep.
I'll eat an avocado, and that will fuel my body a little bit longer as I go through actually usually what's kind of the hardest part of the day where your energy levels are the lowest.
Mm,
So I've learned that if people want a breakdown of, some people really subscribe to 70-20-10 carbs, fat, protein. I'm probably somewhere in that ballpark.
mm,
A lot of the time I'm probably 30-30-40, like balanced, kind of a balanced nutrition approach.
mm.
But hiking, I'm going to lean more towards that kind of stuff. And then in terms of like hydrating as I go along, oatmeal's good because you got to cook it with water. So there's water in there. And then
Mm.
I try to drink some tea first thing in the morning.
Oh, there you go.
That's helped. And then again, when I get up to the summit, I may drink something with a little bit of salt in it, something like a Gatorade, electrolyte replacement, or something like that. Especially if I want to go hiking the next day, I want to have my body be basically able to replenish itself.
Yep.
And I want to start that as soon as I can. So I would say those are the big principles that I've learned going into it. And then post hike, maybe I'm not super wise on this. I tend to want a lot of garbage.
I do
Uh,
too. I'll eat a pizza, a massive hamburger, whatever's
yes.
around. I'll go for it.
I mean, for me, the ideal post hike food is a green chili cheeseburger
Oh man.
because you got your carbs, you've got your fat, your protein, and then you've got tons of vitamin C in the green chili. You're set.
You don't even have to justify that for me. I'm in on the green chili cheeseburger just as is. I don't
Oh,
even have to get into the nutrition part of it. It's going to be tasty.
you called me out. You saw what I was doing there. I was trying to give scientific reasons for my affectation
Oh,
for green chili cheeseburgers.
sorry. I ruined it.
Yeah, dang. Wish you wouldn't do that.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's really big for me though. Is almost equally important because a lot of the time when I go hiking, I hike for 3 or 4 days in a row,
Mm,
and so what I eat after is almost as important as what I eat during. And then you do want to, I mean, ideally you want to be eating good fats and you want to be eating carbs that are going to replenish your glycogen stores. You want to rehydrate, which probably goes against my usual post hike enjoyment, which is a glass of wine or something like that. But I think all that together means that you're able to do whatever you want to do the day of the hike and then maybe do it again the next day. And that's kind
yeah.
of what you're shooting for.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense.
I've never asked you this, or I may have, but when you are Getting hungry and you're hiking, do you have a food that you dream of, Eric? Do you
Oh,
like a fantasy food that you go to in your head?
that's a great question. So once in a while, if I'm thinking of it beforehand, I'll pack like some beef jerky or something like that to go along with the trail mix and protein bars. So if I don't have any beef jerky, that's probably the thing I'm most likely going to be dreaming about on
Really?
the mountain is, oh man, I'd really love to have a Slim Jim or some biltong or something like that. Like that would go down really nice right now. That's probably the closest I can think of that I would come to as far as a food that I would be longing for. So, what would fit that bill for you?
Oh man, as a kid, my dad taking me on cross country ski trips and stuff. I think I don't know if I've ever told this story before. Do you remember, since we're both Gen X kids, there were always those commercials where it would be some guy like cross country skiing and or snowshoeing, and then he would stop and he would pull out a Snickers bar
Oh,
and he would like eat a Snickers and it would, then it would say Snickers really
yeah,
satisfies.
satisfies. Yeah, in his neon
So
green jumper or whatever on the slopes. Yeah.
so I saw that and I thought I always wanted like peanuts and salty things and
Mm-hmm.
caramel and whatever is in the nougat, or I don't
Yeah.
know what's in a
Yeah. You got it. I think you
um,
got it.
something they don't tell you is that when you're cross country skiing, it's probably below freezing
Yeah.
and a Snickers freezes.
It does freeze. Yep.
And when those things get frozen, they are like you could drive nails
Oh,
with
yep.
them.
You'll break your teeth. Yeah.
They are rock hard.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so,
Some people like it that way. They'll actually purposely freeze Snickers bars so that
oh,
oh, you've never seen that?
I mean, I guess there's Snickers ice cream, so that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, when
But
I was a kid, once in a while we'd have it like that, but it's hard to eat.
yeah, so other than that, I mean, I mentioned a burger. I always start
Yeah.
fantasizing about a burger. The other one that I go to is chicken parmesan.
Really?
Yeah, well, because
Where does that come from?
when you think about it, it's it's like a burger. It's carbs, it's fat, and like it's what your body wants right
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah.
And it's tasty as all get out.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, my head goes there. I lived with a bunch of hockey players in college, and that was their pregame meal. And I think that like got into my psyche, right? Like
Interesting.
that's what you eat. Do you have anything that you want to summarize here?
You know, the actually not a summary, but I do have one question kind of going back more to like the day of or the morning of hike. So I'm a big fan of coffee. I've tried to kind of slowly transition to black tea. That's mostly been successful, but thoughts on caffeine before a big hike?
Ah, I mean, I know some people that swear by it. There are cyclists that cannot do a long ride without caffeine.
Mm,
There are runners that I know, drink a pot of this stuff if they could.
mm,
That one I think goes back to individual sensitivities. I
mm.
am incredibly sensitive to caffeine, probably because I never have it.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'll tell you this, Eric, if you ever want to hike with me and stop a lot, have me drink a cup of coffee and then we'll be stopping every 10 minutes for me to pee because it's for me it's like the greatest diuretic ever.
Yeah.
So for me, you've seen me, I will drink some green tea
Yep.
in the morning just to kind of wake me up a little bit, and that releases really slowly into the bloodstream, and it's kind of, you never get that buzz off of it. It's just kind of a nice even kind of mellow level of energy. I know some people will say, oh, coffee it is a diuretic, it will
hmm
dehydrate you, but
Yep. For sure.
a lot of people go the other way. Where are you at on caffeine?
You know, there are sometimes I have coffee or black tea every day. I'll chalk you up for another vote for green tea. I have friends that swear by green tea and how it's so much better for us than black tea.
Mm-hmm.
I've just never liked the taste of green tea, and so I've generally stayed away from it. If I go a couple of days without caffeine, I'll start getting a headache. But if I can go one day where, like, if we're gonna camp out overnight and then the next day we're gonna hike something. I'm generally okay. I don't have any negative side effects of not having caffeine for that one day. But if I go longer than that, I'll probably feel it. So
Hmm.
I'm guessing it's probably best for me at least to say no to caffeine for the one day and just prevent the whatever might happen. I don't know if I would get jitters or if I would again have to pee every 3 minutes. Any of those things would be possible. So I just haven't really broached that subject at all. So just curious what your thoughts were on massive caffeine intake before a long hike.
I think that goes back to individual differences.
Mm,
Everybody's body is different. I think some people respond really well to caffeine. I don't. If I have caffeine, we're recording this at noon my time. If I have caffeine now, let's say I was to take a shot of espresso now, first of all, I'd be out in the parking lot bench pressing cars in 20 minutes, but I would not be able to sleep tonight. So, whereas other people have, they'll drink a cup of coffee after dinner and they're fine. So, I think that along with a lot of the other advice we gave is it's a lot of it's about trial and error.
yeah.
And I think there's some general principles that we've tried to kind of state in chatting about this that are generally applicable, but that's what training's for. If you want to know how your body responds to caffeine before a big effort, since it's springtime, drink some coffee and go for a run or go for a long bike ride or go for a long swim or go to the gym and, you know, hop on the stair mill for an hour and a half and see what that does for you
Yeah, there you go.
and see if that sustains you or not. So I think for me that, yeah, caffeine is definitely individual. I
Mm.
kind of I kind of envy your ability to have it though.
Well, I would say you bring up a good point. So I have to, like, I literally have a cutoff of 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If I have any
Oh, really?
caffeine after that, I'm done. I'll be awake all night. So I have to cut it off. If I have a cup of coffee at noon, I'm probably still okay. But if I go much later than that, I'm definitely going to be having a rough night. So yeah, I'm still probably a little bit sensitive in that respect.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that we want to give our listeners here today?
Well, I think you should just, all of our listeners should be sending king size Snickers bars to Zach Simpson in Norman, Oklahoma. Just throw them on a rocket ship, just send them over to Norman, and Zach will have his supply for the summer.
Either that or a bacon and broccoli quiche sent via
Oh,
FedEx.
there you go. Is it going to be as good as the ones that you used to make, though?
I don't know if those were good or not. Kind of a lukewarm quiche eaten in a car on the way to a trailhead at 5 a.m.
uh,
There were some days where I was choking that down in the name of glory. So I'm not sure about that.
that's great.
Well, what's on tap for our next episode? What do we have going on here, Eric?
Zach, our next episode, we are looking forward to sitting down with the wild wanderer, Laura Clark, and talking about some of her accomplishments and her adventures and some of the things that she's experienced on all of the mountains that she's hiked.
500 plus, I
It's
believe.
it's crazy. She has, and many of them by herself. Like even some of the tougher class four and I think even class fives, she's
Yeah.
done solo. So
Yes.
pretty remarkable stuff. So we're looking forward to sitting down and chatting with her.
And where else can we be reached?
You know, we do have our email address, greensandbluespodcast@gmail.com. We also, as of maybe a week or two ago, we have a Facebook group. And it is not very exciting right now. It's pretty bare bones. We have three folks on the page, and you and I are two of them. So
Who's
it's
who's the
pretty.
third,
The
Eric?
third is actually Rachel, my wife's brother, Justin,
Okay.
who he and I have hiked in the mountains some. He and I've got a couple 14ers together. So
Shout out
he
to
is,
Justin,
yeah, thank you for
loyal
joining the
follower.
page, Just. We appreciate it, brother. But yeah, we're looking forward to adding some additional content, hopefully some interesting stuff that we maybe don't get to in the podcast. So look us up there. And I think it's, as of right now, I think it's a public group, so anyone can join. So unless you are truly an unsavory troll, you'll probably be able to get in and stay in, but just be careful on there.
If we want to drive our social media presence more, Eric, I have two words for you.
Oh.
TikTok.
Oh.
Yeah.
You know,
It's what the kids are into these days.
I have thought of ways that we could maybe incorporate into maybe YouTube or YouTube Shorts at least, and just have maybe just snippets of each episode on a YouTube Short or a TikTok or something like that, just to kind of be maybe a vehicle towards the full episodes here. So there's probably a lot of stuff we could do there. I just haven't gotten the gumption to look into all those different methods of having folks listen to us.
I think recording some videos on mountains with our phones this summer in the midst of struggle
I've
might
thought of that.
might be the way to go.
Like you and I've talked a little bit. I don't think it's going to happen this summer, but we've talked a little bit about maybe Chicago Basin and the Eolus group, and I thought that would be perfect for getting our phones out and every 15 minutes or so. Okay, we just got done with the catwalk. All right, we're gonna take a break here. I don't know how
What?
exciting that would be, but
Yeah. Oh, people be watching that with bated breath.
riveting.
Thanks so much for your wisdom today, Eric, and the wisdom of learning things once and getting it right.
Well, and thank you for the wisdom of everything that you've learned over the years and some of the tweaks that you've made to your diet over the years. We appreciate it, Zach.
Oh, well, thank you. And we look forward to hearing from you guys at our Gmail account, our newly formed Facebook group. We'll talk to you the next time.